Shabbat shalom, everybody. Rob Shmuel here, Rabbi Stephen Epstein, Rob Shmuel ben Yehoshua with you with this week's 10-minute Torah. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all managing the heat, at least in this country. I know some folks in other countries see us. I don't know how your weather's doing, but maybe it's a little better than us. California always gets a little hot, so there it is. Other than that, same world, right? Same story, same things going on. Not much has changed. It's kind of back and forth, isn't it? So, what do we do as people when all that happens? There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of people that are dissatisfied with what's going on in life. And part of my answer would be to tell you to just go on with your life the best you can. That's really all of us can do. But I will tell you this, as human beings, we have a capacity that a lot of us just haven't realized. I know for myself, I've gone through a lot of emotional challenges, let's say. I'm tired of using the word issues. It's one of those buzzwords. I don't like buzzwords. Oh, let's reach out to this person. I hate that. I hate it when somebody says, let's reach out. Let's just say what it is. Let's call them. Let's contact them or whatever. All these, I don't know. I just don't, whatever. Anyway, I've had some emotional challenges in my life. I battled with low self-esteem, or in my case, it was in fact no self-esteem. And I just kind of dragged myself up, from the proverbial bootstraps. I'm very, very proud of what I've accomplished in life. I've been a mental health worker for 6 years. I was a stockbroker. I successfully built and ran my own business for 25 years, and then I gave it up. I didn't like the way the industry was going. And I've been a rabbi now for about, gosh, it's going on 10 years now. 8, 9, 10 years. It's been about, I was ordained in, wow, 2017. Yeah, I have to look at eh, I have to look at my certificate, but that's basically what it's been. And I'm sure a lot of you have had success stories too. The reason I mention it is because, when you have that determination, when you decide I'm going to do it, despite what everybody says, despite what, the odds are, despite what the environment is, this is how we grow, folks. I know the government has a lot to do with it. I know taxes, affordability, that's a big issue, big challenge these days. You know, Sometimes we just kind of got to do it ourselves, you know. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I will remind you what was it, Thomas Edison? I don't know what the number is, but I didn't fail 100 or 1,000 times to make a light bulb. I just found all those ways that it wasn't going to work. And you have people that sometimes early in their life, they decide they discover what they want to do, they embrace it, they go for it, and they're very, very successful. Sometimes people like me, it takes them a while. But the point is, just do it. Just go for it and do your best. You know, Nothing's off the table. Okay. So let's talk about the new book that we're starting this week, Devarim, Deuteronomy. And I will say too that I got sort of a challenge, and that is that we've been doing at my synagogue the Triennial cycle. So the Rabbinical Assembly of Conservative Judaism came up with a schedule so that the entirety of the Torah is read in 3 years. Now, going back 800, 900 years, 1,000 years, when Jews started doing this on a regular basis, reading through the Torah, it was done over a course of 3 years. They would start at Genesis, and over the course of 3 years, they would read the Torah publicly until they came to the end, and that was it. And then later on, they decided that we're going to just do the Torah over the course of a year. And that's basically how Simchat Torah started. Simchat Torah is actually a modern invention. It's a modern holiday. Back then, there was no Simchat Torah. The Torah doesn't mention Simchat Torah. Back then, it was offerings. In the seventh year, we'd all trek down to the temple, and they'd read the book of Deuteronomy. You had the Levite, the cities scattered all over the place where you'd go and you'd study Torah with them. And there was really no schedule to it, no formal schedule. It's only within the modern times, medieval times, if you will, that we actually developed a schedule for reading it. And the Rabbinical Assembly of Conservative Judaism thought that it might be a little too much to read through the whole portion every year. So they divided it up into 3 triennial cycles. The first year, you would read the first third or whatever. Second year, the second third. The last year, the third third. Then, you go back and do the first year again. There are exceptions. There are some portions where they're short, that we just do the whole thing. There are some portions where the main crux of it, like the Ten Commandments, is in Jethro. It's in the back of the portion. So if you do just the first third, you don't get to read that. So Jethro, for example, Yitro, you might, in the first and second triennial, you might read the whole portion. Or the second, you might read the second third, the last 2/3 of it, just to have that included. Okay. So there's been a challenge. Let's read the whole thing. And they thought maybe it might take a little bit longer than just reading the triennial, which it typically does. But this past portion, this past Shabbat, was a double portion, Matot Maseh. And the triennial cycle is actually almost all of the first portion of Matot. So there you have it. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, so in Deuteronomy, basically, and I've said this before, I'll mention it real briefly. If you're a chemistry buff, the first isotope of hydrogen, where it actually doesn't just have the electron, the proton in the middle and the electron on the outer shell, but rather you have a neutron. This is called heavy hydrogen, and it's the first isotope of hydrogen, and it's also called deuterium. Deuterium is from I guess, the Roman word, the Latin word for second. And so it's kind of a review. Moses is reviewing. Okay, why? Because the people that he's addressing is the new generation that has the backbone, the character, okay, the dedication, whatever word you want to use, to go in and conquer the promised land and settle it. The previous generation didn't. They blew it. So Moses is addressing them. There's a lot of commandments that are going to be repeated, some of them in a different form, because these are people that are going to settle the land and they're going to need to know this. And there's some new commandments that are going to be discussed because they're going to need that to establish a society. So the first thing that Moses does is he gives what I like to call a little travelogue. Well, for the last 39 years, because it'd been about a year before the scouts blew it, and went in and gave this, exaggerated. I mean, they basically gave a true report. They just spun it. So people were just freaking out. We can't do this, right? So, and they were doomed to die off in the wilderness. And the next generation, their kids, those under 20, would be the ones that would go that were born in freedom, not in captivity, that would go ahead and conquer the land. So Moses talks about where Israel had been when they stayed, and people are like, why did they do that? The sages tell us that Moses did that because each one of those places represented an event that was not very flattering to our ancestors, like like Moses banging the rock instead of talking to it, like the scouts giving the negative report, like the people complaining about the water, all these things. And they're meant as kind of a warning, as an admonition, but it's also to say, this is why you people are charged with taking the land, not your parents, because they weren't able to do it. They didn't have the character. They didn't have the emotional or the spiritual constitution to be able to go in and do what was necessary. So it's kind of a pep talk. It's kind of a rebuke. It's kind of an exhortation. It's kind of Elvis Presley, who had a Jewish grandmother, little sister, don't you do what your big sister done. It's kind of like that. And when we look at this, when we think about it, there's always a lesson in the Torah, folks. You just got to look for it, or sometimes it just comes out and it's pretty obvious. Other times it's not. But what does this tell you about character? it tells you that people's character can be very fragile. Their self-esteem can be fragile. So we want to kind of couch it a little bit. Now, when somebody needs to be confronted, they're confronted. That's the way it is. Somebody does something heinous, you got to call it out. But for these people, you don't want to insult. I mean, let's face it, it was their parents that blew it. So you don't want to rub it in. You just want to say, okay, this is what they did. Don't you do it. This is what they did. This was the consequence, and now it falls to you. So you are our future hope. Okay, Shabbat Shalom. We're coming up to Tisha B'Av soon, and hey, guess what? High holidays are going to be here before you know it. So we'll start talking about that soon too. All right. So again, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you always for listening. I certainly appreciate it. Glad you're getting stuff out of my little talks, and keep those cards and letters coming.